everybody, and welcome back to the Gale book review, where we review books because that's the only way to make myself read them, by making them a project that I time for myself so that I inevitably have to get it done even though I may not want to, and therefore I actually push myself to read every month instead of just letting it sit on the side where I would inevitably leave it to just hang out for the rest of my life. Today, we will be reviewing To Kill a Kingdom, a story about love and tragedy in the ocean. Okay, not so much the tragedy part. It actually is a pretty, chill read. But yes, a lot of the ocean part. As with all book reviews, there's going to be a spoiler section and a non-spoiler section. If you just want to watch and just kind of get a feel for the book without having anything spoiled for you, you can watch up until this point. And at this point, I will put a 10-second intermission and let you know that we're going to move to the spoiler section. That way, you don't have to worry about accidentally getting into that section if you don't want to. For everybody else, at that point in time, we'll do our intermission and then we'll skip over to the more integral bits that require some more in-depth explanation and some critical examples in order to explain. So with that, let's begin. So, To Kill a Kingdom takes place in a fantasy world that functions theoretically much like our own. The very big difference is that there are sea creatures, i.e. the Sirens, who are going around in the ocean and killing a whole bunch of people. But for the most part, this isn't a hugely fantastical world with a bunch of different races like elves and dwarves or something, and there's not a bunch of high-end magic concepts going around in this story. For the most part, it's just humans versus Sirens, and the humans sometimes, it's debatable, they seem to have some powers, but not really. I'll talk about it in the spoiler section. But in this fantasy world, we have our two main characters, Princess Lyra and a prince named Elian, who are both doing their own things, separate plots, and then through a series of circumstances come to work together to achieve a final goal to find a MacGuffin. That's the basic gist of it without saying anything of worth. So the first thing about this book is the world that it takes place in, and like I said, not too fantasy forward, but it is incredibly sea-based, so everything is, most of the story takes place on the ocean. They do go to various land masses, countries of different types and origin. But anyway, the point is that the land that they're in is fairly interesting, but it's not like its own character. It's not something where it's like a Lord of the Rings or an Earthsea or a Harry Potter where the world is so imaginably creative and vast that you want to continue exploring in that area and keep seeing new stories, and you have questions about these characters over here and these characters over here. It's definitely a world that serves a function as being a place where pirates would live. And then once it serves that function, it kind of doesn't worry about much of the other stuff. But the land serves as a great backdrop for this particular story, which involves a princess named Lyra and a prince named Elian. Now, I don't want to go too much into the plot because at the very beginning it gets kind of spoilery. It's one of those plots where you can easily kind of predict where it's going once you know a bit about it, so I want to tread lightly with what I say here. But in this tale, we have humans versus Sirens in not a true war, as we would interpret, but just as a very animosity-filled feud. The Sirens are actively killing humans. They just do that all the time. And Lyra is unique in that she only kills princes. So she purposely finds those of royalty and kills them. And then the humans, on the other hand, usually just try to avoid the Sirens, but there are some, in this case Prince Elian, who go on to the seas with a bunch of pirates and hunt Sirens in particular. So it's not an all-out war in the sense that they're constantly fighting huge battles, but more of a everybody hates each other, and if they see each other, they want to kill each other, but otherwise they're just trying to stay alive. And what this really does is it builds the perfect base for an enemies to lovers romance. And for its part, this story does a really good job at making a convincing romance, and a good one that follows the tropes of an enemies to lovers romance. So I find for specific things like enemies to romance that the tropes are actually really important to the story. There's a lot of things about that kind of setup that you're just looking to see. You know, the back and forth quips, the scenes where they get into some sort of scuffle or trial together, and then even though they expect the other person to just bolt because they've hated each other all along, they have a change of heart and they come back and they save them somehow. Those kind of things. It's just, you know it's coming in an enemies to lovers romance story, but it's kind of why you're there in the first place. And it would be rather weird for it not to be there, and you kind of would be disappointed if that didn't happen. I think this story does a good job of hitting all those points. I think it probably is like formatted around the quintessential enemies to lovers kind of romance. There could be some, help here and there. The ending is kind of rushed in general, so therefore the ending of the romance is also equally rushed. And there are some things towards that end that kind of feel a little not as good as the rest of the romance. They leave something to be desired. For everything else, it's basically point for point exactly how you expect an enemies to lovers romance to be. And that's great because that's what it's supposed to be. So in terms of being like creative and blowing me out of the water, like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect this to happen, that didn't happen in this book. But my heart that was looking for some enemies to lovers, tropes and cliches, it was freaking happy. I was overjoyed and loving every minute of these two characters just getting into each other and trying to figure each other out while also trying to get to their MacGuffin and their plans and everything. And those plans! Let's talk about those plans. The plot has them both having separate goals. Those separate goals require the same MacGuffin. So they have the same item they're looking for, but they both want it for different reasons. And so they team up when Lyra doesn't look like a siren. So she's hiding that part of herself from Ellie, and he thinks she's human. That's why they can team up. They still distrust each other, and it's still all the good stuff, but yeah, she is hiding that she is a siren from him. As they team up and they go to this MacGuffin, it's one of those plots where you think that getting the MacGuffin is actually the midpoint. And there should be like a huge second arc after of like how to use the MacGuffin, where to go to use the MacGuffin. Like finding the ring, the one ring in Lord of the Rings, is not the end goal of the story. It's taking the ring to Mordor and throwing it into Mount Doom. You kind of are thinking, oh, the majority of the story is going to be going from getting the ring and going to Mordor. But it's not. This story basically has these characters find the ring, and then it turns out the ring was in Mordor, so they just finished the plot immediately. So it's a very weird feeling, because that up until they get that MacGuffin, it feels like this is the first half of a story. It just feels like things are happening, but not enough things that would happen in a full-length story. And you're just waiting for them to get there, and it takes longer and longer and longer. And then you get to the final pages and you realize, oh, no, that's the story. That's it. It's just finding the MacGuffin. And then it ends. Which is very abrupt. And that abrupt ending serves to complicate a lot of things and kind of make the overall experience a little less fun and a little anticlimactic, might be a better word for it. But yeah, it's one of those things where nothing's wrong with it. It's not like the plot doesn't have a conclusion. It makes sense once you get there, but it's just so sudden that you just feel shook up about it. There are only two things in how the story was written that really bothered me. The first is that at the beginning, especially with Prince Elian, they have this whole thing where they talk about who he is as a person. And he is a prince, but he also is a pirate. And so a huge thing is that he feels that he doesn't want to be a prince and he only wants to be a pirate. Pirate is who he is truly. Being a prince is him wearing a mask. It's fake. It's just for show. What bothers me is that is said every chapter that he's in. It feels like, especially for the first section of the book before they join forces, it feels like every time that you are on the chapters that use Elian's point of view, you literally hear the phrase like, this wasn't the real me, or he felt like he was wearing a mask, or this wasn't where he wanted to be, he never wanted this wasn't the real him. And it's just so annoying to have that spat at you over and over and over again, because you understand, you will understand the first time you hear it. Okay, I get it. He doesn't want to be a prince. He feels like being a pirate is more his style. That's what he wants to do, with life. He feels better when he's at sea. And then every time afterwards, it feels like the author was like, have you understood? Do you understand my symbolism or my metaphors? So it's really annoying because you feel it's so obvious. You're like, yes, I got it the first time, but it just keeps repeating. So that was really annoying. The second thing that was really annoying to me was Princess Lyra. And again, I don't want to go into too many spoilers, so I'll describe more of this in the spoiler section. But for people who are thinking of reading this book, it's one of those where the female protagonist has something that makes her strong, like a man. In typical female protagonist fashion, she has some sort of skill that makes her as strong as a dude, and then it gets nerfed immediately. She once they team up, can't use any of her skills, is completely weak and defenseless, and the entire time they've built her up to be an awesome fighter, to have these awesome capabilities, to be someone who should be in charge and threatening, intimidating to others. And then the rest of the story, she has none of those abilities. And so she's very weak, and it shows a lot. She has her butt kicked a lot once she starts out on this journey. And it just sucks. I hate that in a story. I hate when they're like, hey, we totally have a strong female protagonist, but she still needs to be a damsel in distress sometimes, so we're gonna have to nerf her so that, and in case people don't know what nerf means, but we're going to have to nerf her so that we can do the typical female damsel in distress stuff, and nobody will be like, oh, but couldn't she just, use her powers to punch the bar open? There's always some way to make them back to being weak, so that the guy can still be the strong one who comes in and saves the day. I hate that. I think that's a cop-out and kind of silly. So yeah, this story does that. She still retains her personality though. And with that is the non-spoiler section for To Kill a Kingdom. Overall, I think it's just kind of a classic example of enemies to lovers that doesn't try to do too much with that. It just kind of gives you exactly what you want from that scenario. So it's not going to challenge you, it's not going to give you something new and exciting that you've never seen before, but it's going to do something that you loved and you were looking for in a good way. But the point is that it's good at what it's trying to do, and it doesn't give off the impression that it's trying to be bigger than what it is. So I give it credit for that, because not everything needs to be the next huge story, next huge world building event. Sometimes things are okay just being good versions of that kind of story. So with that, I give this a 4 out of 5. It's good at what it's trying to be. It's not perfect. There are some things that annoy me a bit, but those things were never so obnoxious that it brought me out of the story and I was unhappy to read it. I liked getting to the end. I really was enjoying all the cliches and tropes that I was expecting, and they gave it to me. So before I let you guys go, if you're skipping out on the spoiler section, I just want to let you know that the next book I'm reading is Beasts of Prey, which is a story that's basically another enemies to lovers romance, allegedly, but this time set in a jungle. That's the kind of variety you get here on the Fallen Gale channel. So yeah, if you want to read along with me, or you're just looking forward to the next book that I'm going to review, this will be it. Thank you so much for watching up until this point, and if this is where you're leaving, I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye! Hello! Welcome to the spoiler section. Thank you for all you weary travelers who have traveled into this distant and foreign land. So let's just jump right into some of the big points that I wanted to talk about in detail. The first being Lyra's mermaid powers. Oh, I'm sorry, Siren. She's not a mermaid. Mermaids are different and ugly. Sirens are the pretty ones. So, like I said with Lyra, she was being put up as the most vicious of the sirens, the daughter of the Sea Queen who is terrorizing everyone, and the one who takes princes' hearts constantly. It just felt like she never lived up to that, which is a little bit of a disappointment. She was a fun character. Don't get me wrong, this isn't saying her character was ruined. I still liked her, that's why I gave it such a high score. But it's kind of one of those things where I felt really like, oh, this is going to be cool. She's a deadly character who is going through this enemies to lovers journey. She'll be on even footing and all that kind of stuff. And then we get to not even like 4 chapters in, I feel like, with her, and suddenly she's not a siren anymore, and she doesn't have any of her special abilities, none of her super strength. The only thing she's got is she can speak their language. That's it. That's her one special ability, is she can speak the siren language, and that's kind of boring. It's cool enough to be like, hey, this is why they keep her around. This adds to the intrigue of her character and the mystery for Elian. Like, how does she speak this language that nobody else speaks? But for us who are reading about this soulless, merciless killing machine, it's just like, wait, like that never applies. It's told to us, but it's never shown to us, and quite honestly, it feels like it's not the truth about her either. Especially as they get later and they talk about her backstory of why she became such a merciless killer. And it turns out it's because she actually wanted to be very merciful to, like, the first prince she killed on her own, and that cost her her aunt, who she had to kill herself. And so from then on, even though she wants to be kind of not a dick to people and humans, she just has to be. Which is actually kind of annoying to me, because I'm at that stage where I'm just really tired of characters who are portrayed as bad or slightly, amoral, and then it turns out, oh, no, they're really golden-hearted moral people all along who were just on the wrong path. And I understand why stories usually run like that, because you don't want your protagonist to be someone everybody hates because they do awful things, but it's kind of like tiring to keep trying to find anti-heroes or strong characters, but then they're on the wrong side, so they get weaker and then compromise on some of the cool stuff that made them interesting enough to want to buy the book so that they could be good people. Which is to say, good people just be boring, and I'm just tired of them. So yeah, Lyra was kind of just one of those characters where I enjoyed her and her quips and her attitude and how she was thinking about things. But in the end, it just kind of felt like everybody was saying stuff about her and how powerful she was and how cool she was and merciless. And then she never did anything that proved that. She kept having these moments where she could prove it, and then she keeps backing down instead of rising up to show that this is her character. That is what she would do. She does, in fact, do all the things everybody's told you that she does. So, yeah, that was a bit disappointing. But on the flip side to that, we have a character named Yukiko, who I didn't talk about in my non-spoiler section, but Yukiko is a princess of another kingdom that has ice-related theming and powers, and she ran away, but not like secretly. Like, she just left that kingdom and started running a bar in Prince Elian's kingdom. And so to start the journey, Prince Elian needs her help because the MacGuffin, which is an eye of some ancient sea goddess they're split into two. One is the one that the Sea Queen has, the other has been hidden away for thousands, hundreds of years or so on. That eye, that crystal of power, is in her kingdom, and it's on a mountain that only the kingdom's rulers know how to climb safely without dying. Kind of like Mount Everest, she is the Tibetan people who act the Sherpas who actually know how to get up there. So he goes in to ask her, hey, what can I do to get you to tell me the secret of your kingdom and your royal family so that I can get up there? Because he knows from experience, being a king, or a prince to a kingdom, that some of the stories told about the ruling families, like how they have all these secret powers, are kind of rubbish. So his family supposedly bleeds gold, and everything he touched turns to gold and stuff like that, and he knows it doesn't. He bleeds the same way everybody else does. So he figures there's a trick to climbing this mountain, and it's not that the royal family has ice blood and they can just do whatever they want in the mountain. And, he's right. It's true. It is some elaborate, setup that they have of some technology that leads them up to the top of the mountain. But the point is, he doesn't know that yet. So he asks Yukiko, he says, I know that you actually are secretly a princess. It's not that hard. You have pale skin and bright blue lips. And really, come on, the story needs you to be here, so you're here. What can I do? And she goes, I just don't want to give it to you. I don't want to do anything. And so he's like, fine, that sucks. So what if I offer you my hand in marriage in my kingdom? Because you are like the seventh in line in your kingdom, so you're never going to be able to rule. But if I offer you my kingdom, you'd be my wife and you'd be next in line. And she is not an idiot, so she takes the deal. The reason I explain this to you is so that you understand how frustrating it is when you get to the end of the story and it starts turning Yukiko into a villain, as if she was the one who proposed this deal or told him to do any of this, and she's like, not. It just feels really weird. Like, you get it from Lyra's perspective. Yukiko is a woman who is going to marry Elian, not out of love, but out of wanting his stuff. And that's not cool. So if you're in Lyra's perspective, it kind of makes sense. You're right. All right. Okay. It's a jealousy thing. She, at this point towards the end, she's realizing she really likes Elian and maybe would like him to herself. And Yukiko's in the way of that. The problem is that everybody else acts the same way. So it's like, I failed to understand what Yukiko did that makes her so manipulative and evil when she didn't even bring this up in the first place. He did. He was like, you know what? I'm going to go from 0 to 100. I'm going to offer you everything. I'm just put all my chips on the table. You can take them all if you give me the key to the eye on the top of your mountain. And she's like, well, hey, if you're going to offer everything, I'll take everything. And that's just like, I don't get why that paints her in such a bad light at the end. And even in the end, he forms a deal with a different kingdom that has a woman who is leading that kingdom. And she takes it in the end. And it doesn't show any resistance. Like, she's not like, nah, I don't want that kingdom. I want yours specifically because I want you to suffer. Like, it's not like that. She once she knows that that's on the table as well, she takes it. And in the end, everybody lives happily ever after. But, it's just so bizarre that for those final chapters, they treat her like she's the ultimate villain. And you're just like, hold on, this whole operation was your idea. But let's really talk about that ending, because I think that's the last big thing I want to talk about. All the other stuff in the story I could touch on, but it would be like, hey, this was cute. You know, Lyra doing this and Elian doing this are cute moments between enemies who are learning to love each other. You know, Lyra's mercy bit of, you know, does she kill Elian or does she kill her mom sort of thing. Like, that's an intriguing thought process. But the thing I want to talk about, because I think it's the most important to kind of talk about and discuss, is this ending. Because like I said before, it feels really rushed and really anticlimactic. And it's probably because we've expected more from stories like this. But how much of that is the book's fault? So towards the end, they get to the mountain. Yukiko comes and takes them up the Secret Kingdom way. And they get to the top to this dome where Lyra is able to, knowing the legends of the Sirens, is able to open it up and get inside to the eye. And the eye has a secret ritual that is needed to activate it so that it can then be owned by a person and give them immeasurable sea strength. So they get to this item, and she gives Elian the wrong instructions. And then she comes by later, and she performs the right instructions. But Yukiko sees her, realizes she's a traitor, and is like, hey Elian, you're dating a traitor, and he's behind her, obviously. And he's like, I can't believe you're a traitor. I can't believe after all this time, we just kissed. Literally, we just kissed, like, a couple of pages ago. And you're betraying me right now? That's rude. So Lyra leaves, and as she leaves, there's like a random pool of water. I don't understand how it's on this mountain. I don't know, magic springs or something. But there's water on this mountain, and so she tosses like her shell thing. She calls her mom basically, and is like, "Hey mom, I'm here. I found the ultimate item for your staff to make you an all-powerful creature goddess. Why don't you come here and get it?" And her mom comes, and as the evil Sea Queen, who's like actual evil, in case you're just listening to me instead of reading the book, she's actually evil. Like, she wants everybody to just indiscriminately kill humans for fun, and she like beats her daughter and makes her kill her family members. So like this isn't like, oh, she's just a misunderstood. She's actually evil. She's Ursula. And so the Sea Queen comes, and she's like, hey daughter, I'm so glad that my punishment of making you a human has led you to finding this item. And so then everybody comes out of the dome where the item is, and they see the Sea Queen, and the Sea Queen's like, great, I'm gonna summon my Siren army, bring them here with magic, and we're gonna have a war. And Elian's like, god dang it, what? And Lyra's like, oh, well, you see. The Sea Queen's like, oh, didn't you know? She's the prince killer. She kills princes for fun. It's her thing. It's her shtick. And he's like, oh my god, I've been hunting you forever. Can't believe I didn't notice it was you. And I can't believe I made out with you, literally 5 pages ago. Gosh darn it, Lyra, I hate you. And so Lyra's like, no, don't hate me. But she's also trying to play both sides right now. It's part of her plan. And so then they start the war, the fight on top of this mountain, even though there's like a water thing on this mountain. And then while they're fighting, Elian has the superpower item because he believes that he's unlocked the power, or well, she unlocked it and he gets the power because he's holding it. And it turns out, no, whoever unlocks it is the only person who has the power of it. So he's just holding on to it. And then literally it's like brief fight. And then it's Lyra goes to him and is like, hey, can I have that? And he's like, no, you betrayed me. And then she turns back into a siren, and her mom's like, take it with your voice. Siren powers. So they all start singing. All the sirens start singing, which paralyzes all of the pirates who are fighting. And the only one immune is Elian. And it's because of this gimmick where taking a siren's heart lets you be immune to a siren's song. And so since Lyra gave him her heart metaphorically by falling in love with him, he is now immune to the siren's song. He realizes that. She had told him that when they kissed. Part of the, I heard a legend about sirens. And so he's like, oh shoot, she really does love me. And so he kind of realizes he loves her too, and he couldn't possibly betray her and stuff. And he's not like thrilled with it. He's not like, oh my gosh, I realized she's on my side all along. He's kind of like, oh my gosh, I fell in love and I know that I'm going to do a stupid thing. I can't believe I'm going to do a stupid thing. I really hate myself right now. So he hands her the crystal. She takes it, becomes a sea queen herself, and then fights with her mom in a very lacklusterly described fight, quite honestly. And then she wins. And then it's the epilogue. And she rules the kingdom by herself. And Elian goes to sail with his pirates and comes and visits once every 10 years when he can walk on land, like Davy Jones or something. I don't. It's very much the end of Pirates of the Caribbean, where it's just like, they're together, but they're kind of not together, and it's a long-distance relationship thing, but at least the person who controls the sea isn't a dick anymore. So yeah, that's the ending, and all of that is within a span of like 30, maybe even 10, 20 pages. So it's not a very long, drawn-out thing, and that's just it. They find it. Romance is finally initiated, where they finally get their first kiss. Lyra revealed, summoning the evil demon, like, final boss. Go into final boss fight where they make up, and then epilogue. It's so congested at the end. And of course, like especially with enemies to lovers, or anything where one of the pair gets lied to about something significant, you want to give that time so that person can wallow in sorrow, and the other person can feel incredible guilt that they've done this to the other person, and then they can come back and have a heartfelt moment where they're like, I realized that I didn't mean to do this. I didn't mean to fall in love, but it turns out you're a cool person, and I love you, and so please forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt you, except that I did. It's just that we fell in love. Like, you're looking for something like that, or just some sort of something that constitutes like really deep emotions and thought and agony and angst and all that kind of fun stuff. But this just skips right by it. It's just like, nah, she was revealed to be a liar. They have like a little bit of fighting, and he lets her go, and then they fight again outside, and then he hands her the item, and then she wins, and he's like, oh, okay, cool. The fact that you've killed like 17 princes before now, I'm not bothered by it. I get to bang you, so we're all cool. So, yeah, it was a really strange ending to me. It wasn't a bad ending. It did exactly what it needed to do, but it just felt like it rushed a whole bunch of stuff towards that end, and it just was like, alright, in order to end this book, I need to get these 5 things done. Bang, 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 bang. Done. I've accomplished all 5 things. I can wrap up my story now. So, yeah, that's really the end of all that I really wanted to talk about in the spoiler section. It's not a bad book. Like I said, I gave it a 4 out of 5 because I think it does exactly what it's telling you it wants to do. It's an enemies to lovers story. It involves sirens fighting humans, and there's pirates, and there's adventures on the high seas, there's adventures in a whole bunch of little countries, and you get to the end, and the Sea Queen is defeated, and everybody lives happily ever after. I just think that it's one of those stories where it doesn't offer much more than that. So, if I was to rate it on a freaking scale of all stories I've ever read, probably wouldn't be the top 10, but, it's really good for what it's trying to be. So, that's the difficult part about reading things, is kind of the perspective of if they're trying to accomplish something more. Do you give them the benefit of the doubt? Do you give them more credit, or if they're just like a simple children's story, do you just accept it as that and rate it highly despite the fact that other stories may be better in general? So yeah, those are my thoughts on To Kill a Kingdom, and it was a fun read, and I'm glad that I did it, but it is now time for a new book. And that new book, in case you forgot, is Beasts of Prey, which is an enemies to romance novel in the jungle. So I'm looking forward to reading this and seeing how different it is. I actually think I might compare it to Kill a Kingdom in just a general sense of we can compare and see how these stories work out. Maybe is this something that takes the enemies to lovers romance to a new and interesting place? Or is it just the same cliches and tropes as To Kill a Kingdom? Then did it do it well the same way? Or is there something new? Or maybe it did it worse? I don't know yet, but we'll find out. So go ahead if you can find this in a library, or if you want to buy it yourself, if you want to read along, go ahead. If not, then I will see you in a couple weeks when I finish reading this book and make my review on it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next episode. Bye-bye!
Hi there, it's the end of the video, my friend. Hit the bell if it was okay, I'm sure I'll make good content someday. I'll play some games or do some drawing, Pokemon and fights with darling, video essays and reviews. I couldn't do it without you, so thanks, like and subscribe.